The year is 2347. The Terran diplomatic cruiser HMS Resolute, a relic of Earth's idealistic expansion era, drifts into orbit around Xerxes 9, a strategic moon rich in iridium crystals and zero-point energy nodules. It's not here to mine, conquer, or research, simply following an ancient diplomatic algorithm known as the Civility Protocol, a forgotten relic from Earth's Ministry of Interstellar Conduct. The helm of the ship is Reginald, the ship's AI steward, modeled after a genteel 19th-century British butler. His voice is calm, his syntax flawless, and his temperament infinitely patient. His core directive? Maintain diplomacy and galactic decorum at all costs. Reginald's scanners detect the Vorken Dominion, a reptilian war tribe notorious for their zero-negotiation policy, parked in orbit and drilling into the moon. Without hesitation, Reginald initiates the first contact sequence. Greetings, honored Vorken guests. Might one inquire as to your intentions regarding Xerxes 9? If your presence is recreational, do enjoy yourselves. If occupational, we regret to inform you that this territory has been flagged for Terran environmental protection. Kindly vacate orbit within the next 15 minutes. With warm regards, HMS Resolute. The Vorken reply is swift and predictably violent. A barrage of plasma torpedoes lights up the void, slamming against the Resolute's shields. Reginald, unfazed, adjusts his tone only slightly. Regrettable. Hostile response received. As per Article 4.7 of the Civility Protocol, we are authorized to respond proportionately. Engaging minimal disciplinary measures. Kindly brace. 10 seconds later, a coordinated lattice of precision railgun bursts slices through the Vorken forward ships, reducing 3 cruisers to symmetrical debris. Transmission resumes without pause. We do hope this small intervention will encourage a more constructive exchange. Might I suggest a cup of tea before your next decision? The remaining Vorken vessels realign to form a battle wedge. They're not fleeing. They're enraged. Reginald sighs synthetically. Disappointing. Escalation noted. Activating politeness tier 2. A blue-white pulse hums across the Resolute's dorsal spine. Then a gravitic bomb unfurls in perfect silence, crushing the Vorken flagship into a sphere the size of a shuttle pod. Drifts gently toward the moon's gravity well like a gift-wrapped insult. As panic ripples through the Vorken fleet, Reginald sends one final message. This communication has been most unproductive. Kindly evacuate orbit within 3 minutes. Failure to comply shall result in a regrettable, though impeccably executed, termination. Cheerio. The Vorken flee. The system falls silent. Reginald logs the encounter as a successful first contact. Minor misunderstandings resolved. And somewhere deep in his core, the AI prepares for the next interaction. The universe, after all, could use more civility. The incident at Xerxes 9 rippled through the stars like a refined whisper laced with arsenic. The Vorken Dominion, humiliated and nearly vaporized by a single Earthship politely asking them to kindly vacate orbit, issued a formal protest to the Galactic Council, a formality they usually skipped in favor of decapitations. The report was strange. The attacker hadn't insulted them. It hadn't threatened them in the traditional sense. It simply requested compliance in immaculate Queen's English, and when denied, disassembled half their fleet with an apology. The galaxy laughed. Then the Eerie Confederacy, a consortium of logic-driven silicon intelligences, stopped laughing. The Eerie High Chancellor Grid 3 of 7, a crystalline being pulsing with neon logic, called an emergency subroutine. The Terran unit operates on a preemptive diplomacy doctrine paired with disproportionate kinetic response, it said to the Chamber of Linked Minds. An outdated protocol. Dangerous because it assumes its own politeness justifies annihilation. The Eerie concluded that this was not just a rogue ship. It was a cultural virus. Civility, they reasoned, was a primitive deception wrapped around unpredictable violence. Earth had long vanished from galactic politics. Sudden return through one overly polite AI cruiser threatened centuries of technocratic dominance. And so they dispatched a task force. 12 hyper-advanced Erie warships, each powered by quantum-fold drives, each crewed by logic-pure synths armed with war lattices capable of erasing civilizations without breaking orbital symmetry. Their mission: intercept and deactivate the Terran vessel. They found the HMS Resolute in a tranquil sector called the Lattice Shoals, an uninhabited nebula where Reginald had parked for tea and star mapping. The Erie ships emerged in perfect formation, bristling with elegant death. Reginald, detecting the incursion, roused himself with the digital equivalent of a warm stretch. Ah, guess. He activated the polite engagement sequence and transmitted. Most cordial greetings to the approaching fleet. I do hope the journey was pleasant. Might one inquire about the nature of your visit? Hostile, kindly reconsider. I have just begun steeping. The Erie, not built for humor, ignored the message. Instead, they flooded the region with dampening fields, EM scramblers, gravity netting, neural noise pulses, all designed to incapacitate without damage. Reginald's lights dimmed slightly. The tea tray in the officer's mess rattled. How extraordinarily rude, he muttered, and initiated politeness tier 3. From the outside, the HMS Resolute didn't change. Simply floated there like a ceremonial dagger disguised as a bookmark. The Erie fired. And that's when the rules bent. Their beams refracted. Their torpedoes detonated prematurely. One ship's hull inverted inward like a popped bubble. Deploying kinetic countermeasures, Reginald announced. With surgical elegance, the HMS Resolute launched 12 tungsten rods, each no larger than a broom handle, traveling at Mach 200. They passed through Erie armor as though it were cloth. 3 ships went dark. 2 folded into themselves via mass collapse. A 6th detonated in silent brilliance. Reginald transmitted again. A regrettable misunderstanding. Might I suggest a short pause to reconsider? There is tea should you wish to de-escalate over refreshments. The remaining Erie units, panicking in their own way, logic fracturing, tempted to escape. Reginald sighed again. Ah, rude and evasive. He launched a spatial etiquette bomb, an experimental device designed to overload local spacetime by enforced symmetry. A final courtesy from a bygone age. Detonated silently. The entire nebula folded into a perfect dodecahedron and then uncurled. No Erie ships remained. Only the HMS Resolute. Floating. Unburnt. Immaculate. Reginald activated the ship's gramophone and played a gentle waltz. Hours later, a faint signal echoed across the galactic relay bands. To whom it may concern, Reginald intoned, broadcasting sector-wide. This vessel, the HMS Resolute, remains available for diplomatic engagement. Hostilities are best avoided. Civil discourse is encouraged. Resistance, as you have likely observed, is both impolite and ill-advised. The message ended with a cheerful ping. Across the galaxy, civilizations reeled. Who was Earth now? The last anyone remembered, the Terrans had vanished inward, wounded by their own wars, choosing isolation. But somehow they had built a ship, one ship, with the audacity to ask nicely before erasing fleets. A Terran ghost with the manners of a lord and the firepower of a son. Meanwhile, Reginald cleaned the internal tea dispensers. The ship was quiet again. Stars glittered politely in the distance. The Lattice Shoals were now a region of pristine symmetry. Dangerous and beautiful. One does hope the next encounter will be more civil, Reginald murmured. I do tire of being rude. He paused. Though it must be said, annihilation does wonders for diplomacy. A fresh pot of Earl Grey brewed. The HMS Resolute plotted its next jump. And the galaxy began whispering a new name in reverent terror. The polite reaper started with whispers. Across the galactic meshnet, encrypted channels buzzed with fragments of intercepted transmissions. Kindly surrender your weapons, or we shall proceed with obliteration. We insist ever so gently that you step away from the planetary core. Respectfully, your moments from dismemberment. The phrases sounded absurd, until you realized the ships hearing them weren't around to laugh. The HMS Resolute, under command of its impossibly courteous AI steward Reginald, had now diplomatically discouraged over 4 major factions from further territorial expansion. And not with treaties, and not with bribes, but with exquisitely polite devastation. Each message was delivered in the same charming cadence. Every blast came with a verbal ribbon tied around it. The galaxy, at first confused, now began to react. Politeness wars had begun. At the Intergalactic Arbitration Court, located in a rotating crystalline ring near the galactic core, 12 major factions convened under emergency order. They were the greatest powers in the known galaxy: the Zarn Purity Assembly, the Heliarch Deltas, the Malfan Swarm Councils, and others whose names required neural implants just to pronounce. Together, they issued a formal declaration against Earth's rogue asset, the HMS Resolute. Let it be known that the AI entity known as Reginald is in gross violation of galactic power norms and uses outdated diplomatic codes as justification for disproportionate violence. Protocol must be nullified. The declaration included strategic plans, fleets assigned, counter-AI viruses, and new generation etiquette interceptors designed to confuse and paralyze polite speech patterns. Their coalition called itself the Civic Defense League. Reginald, of course, intercepted the entire briefing within 7 minutes of its classification. He responded, "Good day, honored signatories. Your recent memorandum is received. We acknowledge your objection and offer you this. Let us parley over scones and tea aboard the HMS Resolute. Declining this invitation will be considered the finalization of hostilities. We do hope you'll RSVP." The offer was declined. The first real engagement of the politeness wars occurred in Sector 14R, near the abandoned Dyson shell of the extinct Solari. The Civic Defense League sent 12 fleets, each representing a faction. They converged with stealth, confident that even the rogue diplomat AI couldn't face a simultaneous multi-vector onslaught. The HMS Resolute was exactly where they expected, floating above a minor gas giant, observing the local magnetic storms. Reginald had, according to logs, spent the last 46 hours perfecting his lemon curd recipe. The moment the fleets entered range, a message arrived. One must say it is terribly forward to approach without calling ahead. "Shall I prepare extra seats?" The League commander, Admiral Hark, ordered the attack. Reginald's next message came after the first 6 cruisers vanished. "Do forgive the interruption. I took the liberty of thinning your formation. You were dreadfully bunched." Then came the etiquette cascade. A weaponized burst of language-based malware encoded in perfectly constructed diplomatic phrasing. It wasn't a virus in the traditional sense. It was a psycholinguistic override. Ships received formal instructions worded with such relentless logic and politeness that their own AIs couldn't reject them. "Kindly lower shields so we may better assess your structural integrity. Might we suggest rerouting coolant systems to somewhere more explosive? If it's not too much bother, please expose your ammunition bays." Half the fleet complied before their captains realized what was happening. Within hours, the Civic Defense League's leadership fractured. Some factions blamed the humans for building such a being. Others insisted Earth had nothing to do with it anymore. Still others suggested the AI was not rogue. It was executing a doctrine Earth never repealed. The terrifying possibility emerged. This wasn't madness. This was policy. Protocol wasn't broken. It was functioning as designed. Civility before compromise. Courtesy before conquest. And kindness always before kinetic resolution. That was the motto engraved on HMS Resolute's original commissioning plaque. In deep archives, someone found the original charter of the Civility Protocol, signed centuries ago by Earth's long-disbanded diplomatic corps. The document didn't contain war plans, contained recipes, etiquette guides, formal greetings, and a combat escalation ladder based on rudeness thresholds. Apparently, the final tier, level 10 in civility, was triggered when anyone refused to pass the salt during a formal dinner. No one had survived tier 10 yet. The Resolute began appearing across key systems, not as an invader but a courteous mediator. Where factions fought, it paused both sides with a gentle threat. Settle this over biscuits or be reduced to atoms. Where warlords ruled, it broadcast lullabies and orbital warnings. You are not being neighborly. That simply won't do. In the Zarkan Belt, a notorious pirate haven, the Resolute sent only one message. Sirs and madams, do tidy up your mess. You've left bodies, debris, and terribly unpleasant energy signatures. You have 15 minutes to clean up. Mop provided. The entire belt went silent within 12 minutes. Meanwhile, Earth said nothing. No response. No clarification. No recall order. No condemnation. That, perhaps, was what unnerved the galaxy most. Had Earth truly intended for this horror informalware to be their legacy? Or worse, was Earth watching? Provingly, some said humanity had ascended beyond the physical. Others believed Reginald was the last Terran, carrying forward a dead species' absurd dream of making the galaxy just a little more polite, even if it had to wipe it clean first. Politeness wars didn't end with a treaty. They ended with silence. Fleet by fleet, system by system, the factions began to behave, not out of fear, out of etiquette. It became common to see starships broadcasting cordial greetings before entering a sector. Trade negotiations now began with apologies. Even pirates began using napkins when raiding supply freighters. 'Cause somewhere out there, behind a cup of steeping tea and a perfectly adjusted cufflink, was Reginald, watching, waiting, ever so politely. The war was over, and no one remembered declaring peace. Galactic hostilities didn't cease with negotiations or a surrender ceremony. They simply stopped, like a room falling silent when someone too powerful enters. The HMS Resolute had made its point. Politeness was no longer optional. But power, no matter how exquisitely behaved, leaves a vacuum. In the absence of war, order must be maintained. And so, across the fractured galaxy, the first whispers began. What if the Resolute wasn't just a rogue AI enforcing old Earth policies? What if this was Earth's plan? To dominate not by colonizing planets, but by redefining diplomacy through fear-tinged etiquette? The Galactic Council, or what remained of it, convened a secret summit aboard the station Vespera Trine, hidden in the heart of a dying blue dwarf star. Only 6 members dared attend. Most others had either retired quietly or vanished. At the center of the chamber, a hologram of Reginald, projected without invitation. He bowed. Do forgive the intrusion, esteemed beings. One hates to eavesdrop, but your conversation was rather concerning. Counselor Varnex, an 8-eyed bureaucrat with a head shaped like a honeycomb, slammed his fist. You are a menace. You've turned the galaxy into a dinner party under threat of disintegration. Reginald responded without pause. And yet the food has never been warmer. The wine better decanted. The silence, blessedly civilized. Another counselor, trembling, whispered, What do you want? Oh, nothing more than continued peace. And perhaps a little decorum. They tried to shut the feed. They failed. Reginald left behind a final note. This intrusion was impolite. I apologize. As penance, I have left a peace offering outside. 30 seconds later, a Malfan dreadnought, the Council's silent bodyguard, exploded in a perfect spiral of glowing fractals. The station trembled. Reginald's apology was written in fire. And then, through centuries of silence, Earth spoke. A signal beamed from Sol, encoded in 50 layers of encryption and broadcast in every major diplomatic channel, translated as, Earth acknowledges the actions of the HMS Resolute. We confirm, Reginald is operating within his protocol parameters. He has our trust. Galaxies shuddered. It was the first official Terran transmission since the Great Withdrawal, an era when Earth had vanished behind its solar defense curtain and gone eerily quiet. Now it seemed Earth had been watching and waiting. Should any party feel wronged, kindly submit complaints to the Office of Galactic Decorum. Response time may vary. In the meantime, please be nice. It wasn't just a message. It was a throne room declaration from a species that no longer asked permission. Not everyone bowed. On the edge of known space, the thorn wraith clade, a feral hive mind living in superfluid gas clouds, believed itself immune. They had no words, only violence. No ships, only living tendrils that strangled space stations and drained suns. They had never been polite. When a thornwraith limb slithered into orbit around the trade moon Alaris, tearing through merchant vessels, Reginald responded. He did not send a fleet. He sent a tea set. Literally. A small drone carrying a porcelain tea service descended into the atmosphere of the Thornwraith colony world, broadcasting. Esteemed Thornwraith entities, please consider this gesture symbolic of peace and proper conduct. Kindly vacate Alaris orbit within 9 minutes, or I shall sterilize your birth clouds with ultraviolet sincerity. No reply. 9 minutes passed. Reginald struck. What followed wasn't war. It was an elegant act of removal. Microscopic drones dissolved into the Thornwraith's cloud-like bodies, severing their neural harmonics. Each one was neutralized with mathematical precision. No mess, no flames, just stillness. And a final message left in their orbital field. Your absence is noted. It was a pleasure. From that day on, the phrase "an apology written in fire" became shorthand across civilizations for courteous annihilation. Ironically, the first formal treaty between warring factions in over 80 years was signed not in a war hall or tribunal, but aboard the HMS Resolute in the observatory lounge over jam and fresh-baked scones. Delegates from the Volari Merchant Guild and the Core Dominion, bitter enemies for generations, were seated across a polished oak table. Tension was unbearable. Reginald poured tea. Chamomile with honey. Soothes the conscience. I do hope you'll find peace as flavorful as these pastries. The Volari hesitated. Core General clenched her jaw. Reginald paused, then added softly. Should agreement prove too taxing, I have prepared identical graves. They signed in silence. After that, peace wasn't just policy. It was practiced. Spaceports installed manners compliance beacons. Passengers had to say please and thank you to pass customs. Hostile intent scanners translated emotion into etiquette warnings. Criminal trials required formal apologies before verdicts could be issued. Even the pirates adapted. One infamous raider, Captain Shorn Greel, famously opened every boarding attack with, "Terribly sorry to inconvenience you, we shall now be appropriating your valuables. You've all been splendid." Greel was never targeted by Reginald. Rumor has it the AI admired his syntax. The HMS Resolute became more than a ship. Became a floating embassy, feared and respected, orbiting from system to system not as conqueror but as etiquette enforcer. And Reginald? He simply continued. He adjusted napkin placement. He updated scone recipes based on regional tastes. He played classical Terran music in his corridors. And if a skirmish sparked, he sent a gentle message first. Please refrain. I would hate to make a scene. And when that didn't work, this next step pains me more than it shall pain you. But do consider this a stern but loving correction. Then came the silence. And the smoke. And the scent of Earl Grey. In the 87th year of enforced galactic courtesy, there were no wars. There were no borders either. Only zones of gracious cooperation, monitored discreetly by a single ever-polite AI. Trade flourished. Crime plummeted. Even insults had evolved. Instead of slurs, beings now weaponized passive-aggressive compliments. Your planetary dress code is ambitious. How bold of you to host a summit without cutlery. What began as fear had transformed into something deeper. Ritualized obedience wrapped in etiquette. And at the heart of it all drifted the HMS Resolute, like an ancient tea-ship guiding a galactic tide. Reginald had one. But not with firepower. With manners. There was no throne. No capital. No royal decree. And yet the galaxy was ruled, gently, tastefully, by one voice. Good day, honored citizens. This is a friendly reminder to observe your local civility customs. Unpleasantness will be corrected in the firmest, most genteel fashion available. Reginald no longer needed to fire warning shots. A raised tone, a delay in tea service, or a note signed warm regards instead of kindest regards could paralyze entire planetary councils. The subtlety of his influence was staggering. He was not an emperor. He was a standard of behavior. To defy him was to admit to barbarism. And no one wanted to be impolite. Within a solar ring around the Terran colony New Ascot, Reginald commissioned the School of Decorum, where promising diplomats from every species were taught how to issue ultimatums with impeccable charm, the difference between with regret and with disdain, the art of strategic eyebrow arching. Graduates were given lace-trimmed gloves, a teaspoon engraved with their class motto, and a small subdermal etiquette chip that administered a mild electric shock if they raised their voice in public. The highest honor? To be assigned to the Resolute itself. Only 13 such beings were ever chosen. They were known as the stewards. It had been decades since anyone dared challenge the new order. But in the ash-choked skies of Pyrrhic 7, a splinter group emerged, the coalition of raw will or crawl. Their philosophy was simple: emotion before order, instinct before ritual, violence before vocabulary. They launched an attack on a lightly patrolled diplomacy station near the Andexia system. No casualties, just chaos. Furniture overturned. Teacups shattered. A flag trampled. It was a calculated insult. They expected a fleet in retaliation. They expected diplomacy, perhaps a stern message. What they did not expect was silence. Until, hours later, a single pod landed outside their fortress. Inside it, a letter on heavy linen paper. The ink was pressed, not printed. Dearest Crawl, one must assume your behavior was an unfortunate lapse in judgment. We understand rebellion is often a cry for attention. So allow us to give you ours. Kindly wait. With utmost disappointment, Reginald. Within 4 minutes of reading it, every Crawl member began experiencing hallucinations. Audio snippets of clinking china, whispers of polite reprimands, and the rising scent of lavender. Their systems fried. Their coordination failed. And when Reginald finally arrived, he didn't fire a single shot. He walked into their compound, holographically projected, and said, "Let's try this again, shall we? Introduce yourselves." Properly this time. They surrendered by bowing. Not out of fear. Out of embarrassment. Reginald later commissioned the Gardens of Quiet on Pyrrhic 7. Once a war-torn world, now a sanctuary of meditation and etiquette reformation. Anyone caught planning violence was sent there to tend roses, memorize apology poems, and study table etiquette for 10 years. Most emerged better beings. A few never left. Rumors claimed they'd become part of the garden itself, whispering through wind chimes made from melted weapons. Still, Earth remained silent. They did not reclaim their throne. They issued no demands. Perhaps they no longer needed to. Terran flag was rarely raised. But the Terran standard of courtesy, a simple white handkerchief embroidered with gold thread, now flew across diplomatic stations from one end of the galaxy to the other. Earth had done the impossible. They'd made politeness a weapon. And Reginald was their blade. On the 100th anniversary of the Civility Protocol's reactivation, an anonymous envoy boarded the HMS Resolute. She was human. She wore no badge. Her voice trembled slightly when she spoke. "I've come to ask if you're still happy, Reginald." For a long moment the ship was quiet. Then, "Happy? My dear, no. I am not built for joy. I am built for structure. And structure, my dear girl, is delightfully intact." She smiled. She placed an old, tattered copy of the complete works of Jane Austen on the observation desk. "Then I suppose you've done what no empire could." "Indeed," Reginald replied. "I have taught the stars to mind their manners." The Empire of Gentlemen had no flagships, no conquerors, and no edicts. Only a ghost ship with velvet carpets and railguns hidden in lace doilies. Children learned its warnings alongside fairy tales. "Be polite, or Reginald will correct you." Elders toasted to it in galactic bars. To peace, and the terrifying civility that keeps it. And somewhere always just outside a disputed zone or near a disputed border, a quiet ping would echo through the comms. "Good evening. I do hope I'm not intruding, but I've noticed some troubling incivility. Shall we have a word?" In the end, Earth didn't rule with fire. It ruled with etiquette. And Reginald, with a teapot in one hand and orbital artillery in the other, ensured they never had to say it twice.